Andrew Whitelaw from Thomas Elder Markets. Great to have you with us again on FlowFM.
Thanks for having me.
Now
all's well.
All's well for us inside a studio where we've got a roof over our head, but you can't put it over the crops. How do you think things are playing out in the markets, the impact of the weather that we've had, particularly in New South Wales and Victoria?
Complete madness is probably a good way to describe it. It's the rain has come all at the wrong time. We've now got a situation where, especially New South Wales is especially wet, and the forecast is for more wet weather on the way, and it's really causing a lot of concern with grain traders, and obviously even more concern with farmers, because we're really far behind in harvest, and nobody's really in New South Wales, for the most part, been able to really get a good run at it. And so we haven't been able to harvest, and there was a lot of bad images out there of fields completely flooded. But even the ones that aren't flooded, we're getting these moisture issues where moisture is just way too high, and we've also getting issues where there's a lot of downgrading of wheat. And look, if we look at long term, like the last from 2002 to present, we're actually starting to see our discount to, say, AGP, which is Australian General Purpose Wheat, is at the highest discount, so the largest discount we've had since 2002 for harvest period. So that basically highlights that the trade is really concerned that there's going to be a lot of feed wheat around, a lot of feed barley, and that is really driving down that feed market. And that's similar to what we saw in, say, I think 2010 when we had the big floods in New South Wales then. And then the same thing is happening with protein on the higher grades, so H1 and H2, those type of grades. They're seeing some pretty strong premiums at the moment, which, look, it's really down to supply and demand. You know, we've had this rain and it's caused a lot of feed wheat, and it's caused not that much protein wheat.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this impact, like we're saying it's New South Wales, but that impact is being felt as far away as, Western Australia, where their protein premiums are, rising, and their sort of lower grade wheats are seeing, fairly hefty discounts. Look, all we can hope for is that it dries up and we get, a nice week or two or 3 weeks of dry weather so we can actually get harvesting.
Absolutely.
Because the longer it stays wet, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I see that New South Wales farmers issued a call yesterday for a disaster declaration for more areas than just the Lachlan Valley in the state. That's a pretty bad sign that on the winter cropping front there was talk that it's not about saving the crop now, it's about keeping the soil profile the way it was because of the flooding.
Yeah, well, I think it's really a kick in the teeth for farmers in New South Wales. 2018, 2019, the worst drought in over a decade, followed by 2020, really good production. But it's really a kick in the teeth when it has been in New South Wales. It's been almost a perfect year up until November, and it's worse than a drought in my view, because you sort of, in a drought, at least you stop. It's going to be bad, and so you stop applying inputs and you cut your costs. Whereas this one, you keep spending money, and then your crop's ruined at the end anyway because of what happens in a 2 to 3 week window, and in some people, a 24-hour window ruins a crop.
Yep. Just wondering about your colleague I'll catch up with next week, I think, about on the meat front. It sounds to me like there's going to be plenty of feed around. That might help on the beef and sheep front.
Well, that's one of the interesting things, is that obviously the rainfall is, and Matt will be able to talk to you about this next week in a bit more detail. I can gloss over it, but it's really quite positive for livestock producers, because we've got, provided you don't get completely flooded, fingers crossed, touch wood, in those areas, New South Wales and parts of Queensland, and obviously Victoria as well, even now, the grass is growing. And there's plenty. You can put your cows and your sheep out on the fields, and you've got plenty of grass to feed them. And even if you're feedlotting, like I said before, you're seeing the price of feed grains relative to overseas values and relative to other values at particularly low levels. So if it's feedlotter who's hedged, you're in a pretty good position.
How, just checking in on the canola front, things are pretty constant on that level, or does rain play a bit of havoc on that market as well?
Not so much yet. Like we haven't actually seen. We're looking at Adelaide as an example. We haven't seen that much movement in canola prices over the last couple of weeks. They stayed pretty fantastic for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Up and down a little bit within a certain range, but can't really complain about canola prices. And we'll just have to see what happens here. But the reality is, it's the same as what we've been saying. Not much has happened in the oilseed market in the last week or two. But the main thing is that we have a crop. The rest of the world doesn't have a crop. Right? And probably the only major thing that's happened is that we've got the Port of Vancouver in Canada is closed because they've also had pretty bad rainfall, which has meant that they're not able to export any canola, even though they don't have much left to export. They can't export anything at all. So really, canola, it's still all good news, really, for the most part.
Sounds like, in general terms, farmers will be hoping and praying that whatever rain falls, it falls somewhere else and not on their crop, because if they can get it off, they're going to do pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. The prices are generally for canola holding up really well. And obviously it's usually the first one to get harvested, so touch wood, fingers crossed, everyone gets it off and gets it into the silos as quick smart.
All right, Andrew, you're always publishing on the website more information and analysis, pretty detailed at times, about what's happening in the markets. Where can people look that up and find out a bit more during the week?
Yeah, we just have everything up on thomasettamarkets.com.au, and it's, again, we don't make any money from writing these reports. It's just a bit of a thing that we like to do. So there's plenty of information there that anyone can access freely.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew, for your time. Much appreciated, and we'll catch you next time.
No worries. Thanks very much.